Well, rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne. I woke up this morning to finish editing this very video that you guys are about to watch right now, and I learned of the terrible, devastating news and loss of Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness. So I just want to say this video was about 95% edited before I got this news this morning. So this whole video is me sort of talking in the tense that Ozzy Osbourne is actually still with us here on Earth. So I hope that isn't weird for you guys. I intended to make this video sort of like a celebration after his last concert, but now it's sort of turned into a tribute video, I guess you would say. So I just wanted to clear the air. This video was already almost done when I heard the news this morning. So I just want to say rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne. Thank you for all the great years of music. We appreciate you very much. Rest in peace. Ozzy Osbourne has been making and recording music for the better part of 5 decades now, and he holds the distinction of being part of some of the most influential metal albums of all time. Yet despite this, it really seems to me that the public at large really views him more as like a character rather than a musician, despite him being arguably one of the greatest and most influential singers of the 20th century. Now, I was born in 1994, and thus I was not there for his time in Black Sabbath, nor was I live for the 80s output or even his 90s output. Yet, to me, growing up, Ozzy was a household name. I mean, of course, I would hear like his hits on the radio, like Crazy Train, Paranoid, Mama I'm Coming Home on rock radio stations, and on video game soundtracks and things like that. My mom's favorite album was actually Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, so I was familiar growing up with Ozzy Osbourne.
Nobody will ever let you know.
But in the formative years of my life in the 2000s, Ozzy was simply the character Ozzy, right? Due to what in hindsight could be looked as some of the most impressive and effective personal branding of all time, and whether due to his very charismatic and eccentric interviews under varying states of lucidity, or the urban legends surrounding him and his live shows, and of course, we cannot forget what is possibly the most important part of this whole story, right, is The Osbournes, a reality TV show which my parents would watch, and in this show we saw this character of Ozzy Osbourne in this sobering daylight, which I think made himself all that more endearing to the public. However, at the core of his fame, away from the interviews, controversies, memes, video game cameos, and reality TV, remains what made him famous in the first place: his music, more specifically his singing and his songwriting, right? With him and Black Sabbath playing their final show and officially retiring, want to take a look back through the years and take a critical look at Ozzy Osbourne as a singer and as an artist, as the dust settles, so to speak, right? And while we do that, we will go through and rate him on a few categories, including timbre, performance, and charisma, as well as a few others. So, without any further ado, let's get into it here, boys. Well, hello, my friends. We meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? Just a quick reminder before we get into the meat of this video here to hit that like button if you like content like this. It really, really helps channels like mine when you smash that like button way more than I think you think it does. But enough self-shilling. Let's get into it here. So let's get my favorite part of Ozzy's vocals out of the way first here, and that would be his vocal charisma. Now, vocal charisma is a very hard thing to quantify. Either a singer has it, or they don't. There's no real in-between, right? Basically, it is the ability for the vocalist to be able to suck you in with their performance, right? To captivate you. They put it all out there and bleed emotion and earnest effort into their performance. And to me, this is Ozzy's greatest strength as a frontman. Now, I'm not going to sit here and name and highlight all of the great Ozzy performances, so why don't you leave a comment telling us your favorite Ozzy singing moment. Cheers, boys. Leave it down in the comments. Now, this charisma that Ozzy has is really apparent from the first record he appeared on, now 55 years ago. That is Black Sabbath's debut. Here, despite his voice sounding a little bit more deep, round, and resonant than it would be later on, he still just oozes charisma through the microphone, especially as he does those very dramatic wails at the end of every line in the song Black Sabbath, that "oh no!" It really just gives this immense feeling of doom and dread.
Oh no!
Just an insanely good performance from the first First time he ever appeared on a record, right? And these are some of the small touches which really make vocalists special and stand out. And notable on this track also is just how dynamic his singing is. But we'll touch on that later. NIB also has a similar vibe to it with those "oh yes" being insanely iconic, right? You can't help but to sing along. These are just some of the small things which make him such a charismatic vocalist. And a lot of his studio records feature a lot of really memorable vocal moments, ad-libs, flourishes, whatever you want to call them, right? Including those that we mentioned before. There's also the "oh Lord, yes" in War Pigs, you know, that cool distorted vocal in Iron Man. The Crazy Train intro with the laugh and the eyes. The Bark of the Moon howl. You know, the "oh no's" and Flying High Again. And I'm sure I'm forgetting many others in this moment. There are just so many. It is all these little things which, even, you know, if it wasn't his idea to do in the studio, right, really add to the charisma and likability of a singer. And it's these little unique touches that I think really, I don't know, enticed me and entrapped me into Ozzy's singing in the first place, right? You hear Crazy Train, and the guys just go on his laugh and the eyes, right? It just sucks you right in. And then, of course, right, his live charisma is another thing entirely. And well, I don't know. I think maybe even Ozzy's live charisma is probably even higher than his studio charisma. From his enthusiastic and kind of awkward dancing to cheering the crowd on in the 80s to his elder statesman aura in the later years of his career, all the way to the last show that he did actually, where he sat upon his throne while singing, right? The absolute aura that the man gives out is crazy. The man absolutely holds the audience in the palm of his hand in every show. Even in the last show, he was still yelling, "Go fucking crazy!" Like, you gotta just love it, man. You gotta love it. Now, for all intents and purposes, to me, Ozzy gets a 10 out of 10 rating easily for charisma. Easily. Now, I just want to briefly touch on Ozzy's very unique timbre to his voice here as well. And this is an observation and a brain blast that I actually had whilst writing this script, right? This is what it came to me. On the outside, at first listen, he does not have, I guess, what you consider to be called like a great classical voice, if you know what I mean, right? Yet his voice is equally as pleasing to me as any other great singer. And why is that, right? It's not like he's the greatest the high notes or the greatest vibrato or the greatest control, you know what I mean? And why is that? Well, to me, and this was the real revelation that I had, is that he just kind of sounds like a regular guy singing. You know, like really as simple as that. His voice sounds approachable, reachable, and in that same way, relatable, right? There are only a few really difficult Ozzy vocal lines. We'll get to those in just a bit. So I think most people can sing along to most of his songs, maybe even all of his songs, right? Including myself, right? Right in my wheelhouse.
I'm just a dreamer. I dream my life.
And, well, like, it kind of makes sense, right? Before Sabbath, he was just a normal guy. Construction worker whose father was a toolmaker for General Electric, right? He grew up as a rather normal bloke in Birmingham, and it seems that that comes across in his voice, right? In his singing voice. It's very, I almost want to say working class to it, but that might be a little bit too presumptuous. Mama, I'm Coming Home is a really great example of this.
Times have changed and times are strange. Here I come, but I ain't the same.
It's mostly sung in a much lower register and volume, only really reaching these high notes and power a few times. It's a very, very dynamic performance, and it makes this performance sound very, very real, and again, a weird way, very, very normal and approachable and relatable.
Getting turned around by the fire in your eyes.
And by that same token, though, his voice does have a lot of unique qualities to it, right? It is somewhat nasally and has this sort of unique, sort of continuous rasp or grit to it. Very pleasing, and this is accentuated by his choice of melodies, which is always very good. Not to mention, his diction is always very, very clear and sharp. You can almost always understand every word he's saying.
Take me through the centuries.
which is like in stark contrast to his speaking voice, which is very slurred and messy. Do you know what I mean, right?
Weak signal, that's about what's that all fucking day, weak signal.
And one thing that we need to note here as well is his very, very distinctive and recognizable production on his vocals.
Out on the streets, I'm stalking the night. I can hear my heavy breathing.
To me, the sound of Ozzy Osbourne's voice is characterized by having basically every single line doubled with what sounds to be like a slight chorus or maybe a flanger effect on it. After the Black Sabbath era, you almost never, ever hear his vocals without this effect on it. Even on the Black Sabbath records, they would use this production style sometimes to great effect, right? Iron Man is the first song in which you hear this sort of continuous double sound the whole time.
Has he lost his mind? Is he or is he blind?
And honestly, because of the way the vocals sound here, this song sounds kind of modern in a way, right? It really sounds great. And it sort of makes up for the more nasally and more, I guess, shallow qualities of his voice by having the continuous double with the chorus.
Your lifestyle to me seems so tragic. Where's the thrill of it all?
And then, of course, right, all of his solo records feature this continually as well. It really became like his signature distinctive sound, in my opinion. And what this has done is essentially given Ozzy's already unique and approachable voice a really interesting and unique coat of paint, I guess you could say, right? Which makes his singing instantly recognizable. You hear his vocal melodies, you can hear all his words, everything is doubled, it sounds very approachable, very relatable, very humble, right? So for all these reasons, I'm gonna give him a 9 out of 10 for both timbre and voice quality. Sure, he's not hitting the highest notes, but all the notes sound fantastic. And I just love the way his voice sounds, especially with that production on it too.
When I see you on the other side.
So now let's move on to delivery and performance here. To me, Ozzy really always seems to give it real socks when performing, right? That is, he really seems to pour himself into the songs that he sings. Even for instance, on the song he did with Post Malone and Travis Scott in 2019, and yes, that really did happen, he manages to give a very good and emotional performance here.
I feel you crumble in my arms down to your heart of stone.
I love that line, right? I feel you crumble in my arms down to your heart of stone. And Ozzy really sells that line. I love it. Of course, his voice is heavily processed, right? But no amount of vocal processing can give someone's voice soul. And right, this all comes back to my point of Ozzy sounding like a normal guy with a lot of charisma. You know, don't get me wrong, right? He is a good singer. He is a good singer, right? He was always on pitch, always delivers some very dynamic and fantastic performances. And like we touched on, his diction and vowel choice is always very clear, right? But he isn't the greatest technically proficient singer with the greatest range, right? What he does have is soul, emotion, and the sort of working class authenticity, endearing deferential humbleness to it. Even at his highest, most popular songs like Crazy Train, his voice sounds like it's nearly straining to reach some of those high notes in the chorus, right?
I'm going off the rails on a crazy train.
Just sounds like a normal guy going on stage, giving it his all, and just fucking killing it in the process, and I absolutely love it. I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say here. This is not at all, right, a sort of condemnation or criticism of his singing voice, right? In fact, it's the opposite. It's about the highest praise I can give a singer, right? To have me just enraptured by your singing and to believe the words coming out of your mouth is huge praise, and to deliver vocals with such soul is such a rarity. And I don't know, I just absolutely love Ozzy's singing voice. I don't know, I don't know what to tell you guys here.
Politicians hide themselves away.
Ozzy Osbourne's range also isn't as shallow as most people seem to parrot, right? Yes, Ozzy has his wheelhouse, right, which he spends most of his career singing in. But in songs like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Supernaut, Symptom of the Universe, and many others, he does sing pretty damn high register, right?
I wanna reach out and touch the sky. I wanna touch the sun, but
I mean, like, he is no Rob Halford, right? But to me, saying Ozzy's vocal range is limited seems to be a bit too harsh and sort of like a cheap way to discredit his singing and how actually good he is, you know? And really, his greatest strength is his ability to create simple and memorable melodies. Supposedly, he would ad-lib all of the melody lines over top of the instrumentals before adding the lyrics. And by doing this, you are crafting the words and lyrics to fit an already established pleasing melody, which he's really good at just intrinsically coming up with them, right? Rather than forcing a melody onto lines that are already written. To me, this is a huge part of why he just has so many uncountable great vocal lines and sing-along parts, right? Even in his live performances, it really does look like he's just letting it all out there. With his call-outs to the crowd or somewhat awkward dancing and gallivanting on the stage, it all comes back to his insanely high charisma and this authenticity that Ozzy just carries with him wherever he goes and whatever style of music or even genre he performs on. And I mean, like, we are just so blessed to have an absolute ton of great pro-shot live footage of concerts featuring Ozzy. My favorite has to be the 1985 Rock in Rio concert. The man is just firing on all cylinders, running on the stage, pumping his arms, yelling at the crowd, all while sober. Here, mind you too, right? That's what makes it all impressive. Love this footage, love this concert, great setlist, and it's just a prime example of why Ozzy is such a great frontman. So performance and delivery, I'm going to actually give Ozzy a 10 out of 10 here as well. Now, while it may not be correct to call Ozzy the greatest singer in metal history, that title is still up for debate. However, I would definitely 100% consider him for one of the greatest frontmen of all time, right? He may not have the technical ability and power of Ronnie James Dio or Rob Halford, but what he does have is an incredible ear for melodies, an instantly recognizable voice and sound with this insane charisma that bleeds through the speakers and combines this all with this working class enthusiasm and vibe throughout his singing career. I absolutely love Ozzy as a singer, one of the best of all time, one of the best to ever do it. Have a great retirement, Ozzy. So let me know your favorite Ozzy vocal moments down in the comments. I've been Varvis. Cheers, boys.